Good evening, everybody. Welcome back to Baumhauer's Victory Grill here in Tuscaloosa, closing in on Saturday's matchup between Alabama and Kentucky, presented by Chevron with Techron. It's the Crimson Tide and the Wildcats coming up this weekend. Coach Saban will be along in just a moment or so. Senior writer from ESPN.com, Ivan Maisel, is our special media guest. Great to have you with us, Ivan. Good evening.
Eli, I am delighted to be here.
A lot of folks may not have known that you are an Alabama boy from down in Murphy High School, huh?
Murphy High, I was a Murphy High Panther, and as were my parents, so I'm quite fond of Mobile.
I hear you. Tell me, you've got this entire blank canvas onto which you can paint your masterful words. How do you determine each week or each day what you're going to write about?
Honestly, Eli, if I get stuck on what the story is, I imagine if I were going to tell one of my buddies or my brother, what I saw, what's the first thing that I would tell them? Mm-hmm. And that I figure out that's my lead, and then I just go from there.
Very interesting. Do your editors keep you in line? That's the poor description, but do they say, hey, you're writing too much SEC, let's hear something about the Big 12, let's hear about this guy instead of that guy? Or have you earned, obviously, enough chops over the years to go in whatever direction you'd like?
I pretty much can go wherever I want. There was a time, they still tease me about writing a lot about Alabama, writing a lot about Stanford, where I went to school, and over the last decade, our two daughters both went to Stanford, so and luckily, Stanford was very good, so I kept finding my way out there. But it's generally they leave me. They tease me, but they let me do what I want to do.
I hear you. That's the voice of Ivan Maisel, senior writer from ESPN.com. He was with CNN, SI, and everybody's availed themselves of his talents over the years. And Coach Nick Saban has now moved in beside me here. And Coach, I dare say you've had an opportunity to spend a lot of time with Ivan and enjoy some of his creative ability. Some folks are just wordsmiths, and he's one of them.
Well, Ivan's been a friend for a long time, and certainly have a tremendous amount of respect for him. The media is getting beat up a little bit in these days for not reporting the news all the time, but the true old professionals in the business, we have one of them on here tonight, Ivan, and I've always had a tremendous amount of respect for the quality of work that he does and the research that he does, and make sure he gets it right. And that's, some people think that's a lost art in this day and age, but
I hear you.
Not with Ivan.
Coach, before we jump into the show, I want to take a little turn right here before we go any farther. There are a couple of people who are here for every single show that we do. They're at every single game, home and away. And regretfully, neither one is here tonight. Robert Stillwell passed away earlier this week. His wife, Johnny Sue, they're from Anniston, Alabama. Among many things they've done, she's always here with that big birthday cake for you. I know you know of whom I'm speaking. Robert passed away the other day, and Johnny Sue's got a few medical issues now. And I just wanted to take a moment to offer condolences to that family and the speediest of recovery to Johnny Sue.
Well, I certainly appreciate you telling me that. I'm really disappointed that I wasn't informed of that because Johnny Sue is and her husband are probably, if you're going to give an award for the greatest Alabama fans, they would be right there. I mean, they're at every away game. They're at the hotel when we get there. They're always saying hello. She's always very kind, and I think her heart lived and died with Alabama football, and I'm very, very sorry to hear about her loss, and our thoughts and prayers are certainly with her and her family.
Definitely. I wanted to bring that up because I know you're busy, and I didn't know if you had heard about that. Ivan, why don't we let you open up the discussion here and throw the first question at Coach Nick Saban.
Well, Nick, I was curious, playing a more traditional team like Kentucky this week with the schemes that look more like what we are used to than what we've seen over the last few years, if there's some level of I don't know if comfort's the right word, but it's the football that we're all a little more familiar with. Does it give you any sense of, oh, thank goodness I'm not dealing with all this new crazy offense that we're all seeing now?
Well,
You're saying we're all older, huh?
let me put it this way. I'm going to phrase it a little bit different. You know,
Please do.
I think Kentucky has a way and a philosophy of how they want to play, and I think they want to run the ball. They want to take shots. They throw a lot of screens, and that's and some RPOs, which is their way of spreading out the field. But their sort of method of madness is to have a lot of multiple formations, a lot of unbalanced formations, a lot of unbalanced receiver formations, to really run the same plays to try to get the defense confused. So this is not your traditional how people used to run the ball. All right, it's very well conceived, and it's really good that we had some extra time in preparation for it, because even though, as you point out, it's more normal in terms of the plays that they run, it's not necessarily normal. It's for what you see every week. All right, so it's different than what the players are used to playing against. And I think the philosophy being if we run the ball and shrink the game, they play good defense. They got a really good front seven. They got big people. They play a lot of zone. They don't give up a lot of big plays. That's why they're one of the lead teams in the SEC in pass defense. And philosophy-wise, that gives them a very good chance to be in the game and have a chance to win. And they've actually, had a chance to win every game they played this year and actually lost a couple games that they very easily could have won.
Exactly. And for the folks who may not be checking on all the numbers, just like the coach said, they are second in scoring defense in the SEC, 24th in America. They lead the conference in pass defense, second in passing efficiency defense, fourth in total yardage given up, 39th in America. Those are numbers that don't happen just by accident, Coach.
No, that's right, and that's it's indicative of how they play. They're very physical. They're well coached. They really know their system and scheme. They don't make a lot of mental errors, and the biggest thing is because they play a lot of different types of zones and do a really good job of disguising them. They don't give up a lot of big plays.
Mm-hmm. Let's go to the phones as per usual. Our first caller of the night, brought to you by Alabama 811. Always contact 811 before you dig. To know what's below, call 811 or visit al811.com. Let's go to Pee Wee. He's down in Grand Bay, Alabama. Hello, Pee Wee. Good evening, sir.
Good evening, Eli.
What's
how
going
you
on,
doing,
Pee Wee?
Coach, you had made earlier in the week, and somebody had asked you about how you try to keep things normal with the game being canceled last week. I was just wondering, how did the players respond to that, just trying to keep everything together, stay inside their bubble, and yet being able to stay focused? Because nobody wanted to play more than they did last week, and we were all disappointed. But how have they been able to stay focused this week and looking forward to this game?
Oh, I think they've been good. We try to keep the same routine. I think that's the most important thing, is players stay in the same routine. Even though we didn't have a game, and it's 3 weeks since we played a game when it comes up on this game on Saturday. But we practiced on the same days, did the same things, practiced not Friday because we usually just walk through, and then we practiced Saturday as if we had a game on Saturday, and then we did the regular Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday this week. I think if you ask the players, and I would never ask them this question, I'm sure they'll say they're tired of practicing. Because when you get in the season, you sort of get in the routine of this is what we do each day, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and then we play a game on Saturday, and then we sort of get in that rhythm and routine, just like all of us have a rhythm and routine. Like I get up in the morning, I turn the coffee on, I go to the bathroom, I let the dogs out, I come back and pour a cup of coffee, get 2 Debbie cookies, sit in my same chair, put the Weather Channel on. It's almost the same time every day. All right, and that's it. That's how the day starts. If the day doesn't start that way, it's messed up. All right, so everybody's got a routine, all right, that they go through and that they do. All right, and that helps you function. And I think when you have disruptions, And, you know, Dr. Rosen told me about this, that, you know, when he was in Vietnam, he was a psychiatrist, so he used to interrogate the prisoners of war. And the number one technique that they broke them down with was constant disruptions.
Really?
All right, you're going to eat at noon, no food comes at noon. All right, we're going to change your cell, nobody comes to change your cell. You're supposed to go outside and be able to walk around a certain time, you're not allowed to do that. And you do that over time, and people create so much anxiety but by not knowing what's next, all right, that they just, you know, lose it.
Interesting.
And, you know, we've all gone through that. I mean, since March until now, I mean, everybody's got disruptions in their life. All right, but when you're a football team and you're a football program, you know, you really got to get the players to understand, you know, what are you investing in here? You know, the future of Alabama football. All right, what do you want to invest in your future? And it's a simple yes or no. Do you want to invest in your future or you don't? And if you do, you got to stay out of the virus's way, all right, because that can destroy the team and negate everything that we work for more than anything else. So even when somebody else has an issue, we still have to be able to deal with that. You know, nobody in the world knows what's going to be sort of dumped on them. You don't know whether you're going to have good fortune in the future. You don't know whether you're going to have, you know, tremendous adversity to overcome. Nobody can predict that. All right, but if you have really good character as a person and you're committed, you have discipline, and you're committed to doing certain things, all right, your character is going to allow you to overcome adversity. Your character is going to enable you to deal with success so that you can keep making progress, whatever happens, because we don't know what's going to happen in the future, whether it's going to be good or whether it's going to be bad. So that's really important. I try to, you know, get our players to understand that. And they've done a pretty good job, you know, so far. I can't predict if this 3 weeks off is going to, we were getting momentum and we were improving and getting better. I don't know how that's going to affect our team. I really don't. But day to day, I'm not disappointed in how they manage practice, how they handle practice, what their focus and energy level was in trying to get through this and prepare last week for one team, changing, shifting gears, and getting ready for another team.
By the way, the NCAA released the graduation success rate figures on Tuesday of this week. The men's basketball team at Bama remained perfect at 100 again this year. And coach, your football team moved up to 88, which ranks it third in the SEC. That's the 12th year in a row that the Tide football team is ranked in the top 4 in the conference for the graduation success rate. And that point total is 7 points better than the national average for schools in the football bowl subdivision. So a tip of the hat to you and to all of your guys who monitor the kids and make sure they get their classwork done.
Well, we have a great academic support program. We have a really good system. We have really good people. We have a facility that's really convenient for the players' use right next to Bryan Hall.
Right.
You know, we really do a great job of creating a culture of accountability in academics because we check everything the players do, and you know, they end up developing the kind of habits that they need to be able to have success. But this is where statistics are not exactly 100% correct. If you take all the players that we've had go out for the draft early in the last 10 years,
Right.
there's been about 35 of them that would have graduated in 1 year if they'd have stayed in school. All right, so if you go back in every class and put them in there, our graduation rate would be 97 or 98% if you couldn't go out early for the draft.
Sure.
So my point being, we don't really have hardly anybody failing in school and not graduating, even though that statistic only shows because some of those guys, you know, don't fall in the timeline before they graduate. And we do have, you know, several players that come back and graduate later, and then we encourage them to do that when they go out early. But that's the one thing those statistics don't really show.
Little misleading.
It's
How
a little
tough
misleading.
is it to ride herd on these kids? I mean, they seem, you know, talking to them, they seem to be excited about not only being here, but, you know, going to class, let alone what they do football-wise.
Well, you know, we sort of recruit them that way. We tell guys, look, we're going to recruit you and try to help you develop as a person, as a student, and as a player. And we're going to be just as committed in all three of those areas. So we have a lot of personal development programs to help them make good choices and decisions so they can create value for themselves in their future. I don't think a lot of guys realize, how much value they can create by being good people. I mean, I've already give you the and but story. When I was in the draft room, I used to just sit and listen to 1,000 draft reports. And the two words that I was listening for, the most compelling words in a draft report about a player, was and but. Because as soon as they talked about what kind of player he was, he's a corner, he can run fast, he can change direction, he can come out of a break, he's got good hands, good ball skills, and he's a good person, he graduated from school, he's got great character, he was the captain of the team. But when they read that player and they say, but, all right, what comes after but usually is not
Never
good.
good, no.
It's never good. All right, so which one of those guys do you want on your team? All right, and we always emphasize to our players, the importance of developing character. And don't give anybody a reason to say but. All right, academics, you're going to college to prepare yourself for the day you can't play football. And, we hammer that in recruiting. And we tell guys, this is the culture of accountability. We're going to check everything you do. You got to go to class. You got to go to your tutors. You got to do what you're supposed to do. And they know that before they come. So the guys that don't want to go to school don't come.
Yeah.
All right, the guys that don't want to be good characters, they don't end up here. And then we tell them we want to help them be the best players that they can be so they can create value for themselves, to have successful careers while they're here and see if they can develop a career so they can play at the next level. And we want them to focus on their development. Everybody in recruiting talks about how guys can play as freshmen. All right, but if you look at everybody's team, how many freshmen do they have playing? So it's a real false sense of, being outcome-oriented rather than process-oriented. What do I have to do to get the outcome? And I always tell the story, I tell players all the time. We've had 35 guys go out for the draft early in the last 9 years. I might be off by a guy or two. And so 32 NFL teams call me about every one of those players. Mm-hmm. So that's over 1,000 phone calls. I've never yet once had a general manager ask me how much a guy played as a freshman. Not once.
Yeah.
They want to know, what did you develop into? What kind of player are you going to be in 3 years? What kind of person are you going to be in 3 years? I said, so that's what you have to focus on, is what can you develop into? And, the thing that we get beat up in recruiting, I was just on a recruiting call before I came in here. Guy can't play there. The guy's visiting LSU, Texas A&M, and all these places.
Sure.
All right, and Clemson. And he's convinced he can't play here, but he can play there.
Really?
But, that's what gets sold in recruiting.
Yeah.
And I couldn't tell you one thing about the guys they have at a guy's position in another school. I'm trying to manage ours, and I'm sure they don't know anything about our guys.
It's amazing.
If you look at the left tackles on our team, that have played in the last 14 years of being here, I think there's only one left tackle that we've had that wasn't a first-round draft pick. Go from Smitty to Carpenter to just go through them all. Cam Robinson, all of them. Cyrus Kwanjo was the only guy that didn't start as a freshman because he had an ACL when he's a freshman.
Yep.
So he was a second-round draft pick. But everybody else was a first-round draft pick. Every one of those guys played when they were freshmen. Every one of them. Started when they were freshmen. But if you go into recruiting, it's like we got 10 left tackles like that. Well, if we had 10, how could those guys all start as freshmen?
The thing I find interesting, and Ivan, you probably get this when you talk to kids, they'll say, well, you don't want to go to Alabama. You can't play there. Why is the kid, they're telling him you're no good. You can't play in this location. And to me, that would be a negative, a downer. But who knows? Ivan, your turn. Jump in with the coach here.
Well, yeah, Nick, I'm curious about that because you spoke earlier this week about Miller Forrestall and how he came in and you knew from the start he was going to have to develop. What percentage of your recruits now come in that have to develop, and has that percentage changed from 10, 15, 20 years ago?
Yeah, it's changed dramatically. And I don't blame you for this, okay? You're my buddy.
I don't cover recruiting. So.
That's right. You don't cover recruiting. But I think one of the things that is very, very difficult for young people is, 20 years ago, we didn't have all these recruiting ratings and ESPN 300 and, 24/7's got their top guys, and you got 5-star guys and 4-star guys and all this stuff. So we sort of create delusional thinking by making a guy the best guy in the country at his position or whatever. And therefore, people start thinking that I'm just going to go right in and start, and they have an expectation. And we create this expectation for young people and players that they're just going to come right in and start and make this huge impact, in the program. And it's all because of the accolades that they got, as high school players. And I'm happy that they get the accolades. I don't mean that. But it's the expectation that gets created. Then it creates a tremendous amount of frustration when the reality of they get here and they see that they're not quite ready to play and they're not quite as good as they thought they were. And even though they have a lot of talent and ability, they have to go through sort of a learning process to be able to develop as a player. So you kind of need a combination of guys who really understand I have to develop. And development is the most important thing. And I try to sell this in recruiting, to players so that they understand that this is the most important thing, not just, outcomes are a distraction. I say this all the time. You got to focus on what you got to do to get the outcome. And that's not what we create in the world. We're an outcome-oriented world right now. All right, so everybody wants to have immediate success, immediate self-gratification for everything they do, but, it's not about what do I have to do to get that.
Good point.
I agree. I like having written. I don't like writing, so I understand completely.
Yeah.
Hey, Coach, we got a question from the Nick Saban Show blog on AL.com. Jerome in Birmingham says, hey, Coach, with the unfortunate injury to Trey Sanders, can you tell me something about the young guys like Roydell Williams and Jace McClellan that will provide depth eventually at running back? What type of runners are they? Thanks, and Roll Tide.
Yeah, well, we really, are very thankful that, Trey Sanders, he got T-boned in his car, and he wasn't driving, but they just pulling out to go across an intersection, and, he got hit in his side, and, we're thankful that he's got some very serious injuries, but everything has worked out very well. I think he'll make a full recovery, but this is probably going to be a several month, type thing. And he had a hip injury, but not the same kind that Tua had, so it shouldn't, be any question about, his recovery. So we feel very fortunate. But to answer your question, these two guys are talented guys. They both have they're very instinctive as runners. They have good hands. They're complete players. We have a lot of confidence in their ability to play. So we're sort of looking forward to seeing, how they respond, when they get in there and get some experience. But they certainly have really good ability, and, I think they'll do a really good job for us.
Wonderful. Let's go back to the phones, Coach, and head down to Prattville, Alabama. Bud's on the phone. Welcome into the Nick Saban Show. Good evening.
Good evening, Coach. Good evening. Thanks for taking my call. Good evening, Coach.
Hey, Bud, how are you?
I'm doing fine, sir. Doing fine. I hadn't heard you talk too much this year about our new strength and conditioning coach and the new sports medicine doctor. I'd just like to get your input and thoughts on their progress and how you think that's going, and have you seen any effects on the team with the athletes this year?
Yeah, I think, what happened to us with the two new strength and conditioning coaches has been a real asset, for the program. I think that, Scott Cochran did a really good job for us. But, this whole culture of sports science has changed the whole conditioning of athletes and development of athletes. And there's so much more scientific, now. So, what Bullet and Ray give us is Dr. Ray is actually a PhD, and he actually can test guys. Like we have hamstring tests now, and we actually have tests that we give that if guys meet a certain threshold on 3 or 4 lower body tests, their chances of getting an ACL are next to nothing. We've had a lot less soft tissue injuries, this year, knock on wood, than we've had in the past. All the stuff that we do now is velocity training. All right, so every piece of equipment in the weight room has a little numerator on it that tells you and measures your explosive movement on bench press, squat, whatever it is that you do. So the player is always getting immediate feedback on how am I improving. And if you just take explosive strength in the lower body, which usually, sort of dissipates as you go through the season because you do less of this kind of stuff because you're more practice time, we have actually made steady progress in how our players have been able to do that. The other thing the scientific approach does is it takes out the guesswork for me, because we're using catapult and all these explosive movement measurements in the weight room that are scientific and specific. All right, so, people used to come to me and say, oh, we're practicing too much, or the players are tired, or whatever. I had no basis for it other than some guy came in feeling tired, all right, and that doesn't mean anything.
But now you can see the numbers.
All right, now you can see the numbers and you know exactly where the team is, so you know if you have to pull guys and minimize their reps in practice because they're losing explosive movements, which means they'll lose speed and power if they're linemen. And so all this stuff is tracked, and we get weekly reports on knowing. So it's so much better. And the Sports Science Center that we built, from a recovery standpoint, has been hugely successful for the players. So it's been really, really good. I mean, I can't tell you how pleased I am with, the job that these guys have done and the changes that we made, in exercises and flexibility and all these areas that I even do it. I do flexibility with the players before practice, and I would have never done that ever before. I mean, I lay on the ground and do everything that they do, and I mean, I'm doing it because my hip hurts and all that, but it makes it better.
It's amazing. Could you ever imagine back in the days in West Virginia that the game would come to this with such technological advances?
Well, let me tell you what our technology was in West Virginia. All right, we had a field with no grass. All right, we had a hill with no grass. All right, and we had tires in the dirt and the mud. All right, and so when we went out, we ran up the hill, we ran through the tires, we did jumping jacks and push-ups, and we scrimmaged. And there was so much dust between plays, you couldn't see the other team for about 10, 15 seconds because we didn't have any grass on the field. All right, but we never lost a game.
Different technology, same result.
Never had any weights, never had a weight in the whole school. Had some good players, though. They were fast, too.
I bet they were. Our special media guest tonight, the legendary sports writer, senior writer for ESPN.com, Ivan Maisel. Sir, you're up with another question for the coach.
And Nick, offensive numbers are off the charts this year, certainly in Tuscaloosa and across the country. And I'm just curious what correlation there is between that, if any, and the no spring practice, not much of a summer workouts. Is there any correlation between that and the increased offensive output?
Well, I certainly think that it's a little easier to, when you don't have organized workouts, to be able to get more out of it offensively than defensively. Like, in the summertime when we weren't allowed to have any kind of face-to-face workouts, the offense could run all their plays, all their passes, all their play-action passes, all their everything on air. The defensive players can't do anything on air. All right, because you have to have something to react to. Playing defense is reactionary. A guy blocks down, I scrape. A guy does this, I do that. He runs in the seam, I take a man-to-man. He goes under, I play the flat. All right, well, if you're not allowed to line up on a guy, you can't really develop any of those techniques. So it was really, really difficult, all right, to get nearly as much out of what we were able and allowed to do. And I'm not saying what we were allowed to do wasn't correct. But I'm just saying what we were allowed to do was very difficult to be able to develop defensive players. Same thing with like teaching tackling, all right, or even doing any kind of work on an opponent. All those things have to be done against somebody else, all right, when you're trying to play defense. So I do think that has something to do with the development, but I also think that, and I've said this many, many times, the rules in college football and the way, the coaches have taken advantage and utilizing those rules. I think when everybody put the rule in, you could block behind the line of scrimmage on a pass, throwing behind the line of scrimmage, you could block past the line of scrimmage. I think when that rule was put in, everybody was thinking of screens. Now the two guys crack and a guy runs in the flat, and as long as he catches the ball, they say behind the line of scrimmage, but they give him 1 yard on the other side of the line of scrimmage. It's a legal play. Just like last week, when we were playing our last game, it's 3rd down and 4 or whatever, and they're out here in the slot, and they swing the back, and both receivers come in and crack the linebacker who's covering the back. And that's a legal play. So how do you play man-to-man? So then if you play zone, you can't stop any RPOs. All right, so, the way the game has progressed, I think it's much more difficult you create so many run-pass conflicts on defense that it's harder to play good defense. And I don't think this is something that's just happened this year. I think back in 2000, I don't know which year it was, 9 or 10, we led the nation in scoring defense and gave up like 8 points a game. It would be totally unheard of any defensive team giving up 8 points a game in college football right now. It would be just completely unheard of. If you give up 15 points a game, you're one of the top teams in the country in points allowed. Mm-hmm. There's so many more explosive plays, down the field, than there have ever been, before. And we've taken advantage of all these things. I'm not complaining about it. We're talking about defense. That's how we score 47 points a game, too. Just taking advantage of all these rules and regulations that you're allowed to do in college football. So I really think the days of playing great defense and winning are probably maybe behind us. And I think that all the teams that you see win championships now are teams that can score points.
Defensive coordinators are rolling over all over the country. Heck, when he was here, Gene Stallings, you win on defense. And but at the same time, Coach, since the second half of the Georgia game, your team's only given up on average 6.8 points a ball game. So you've got yourself a pretty darn good defensive unit, however you want to describe it.
Well, they're getting better, all right? We had a lot of young guys early, made a lot of mental mistakes, who didn't tackle very well, especially in the secondary. All right, so we're improving. We've gotten better, but we're going to play some better offensive teams. And I think teams that have a good quarterback make it much more challenging.
Sure.
When you have a really, really good quarterback, and there's some really good quarterbacks in our league, and we're going to face a couple coming up here, so it'll be interesting.
Hey, how's Jalen Waddle doing? I know the fans are always curious as to guys rehabbing. How's he coming along?
He's doing great. He really is. I actually talked to him for a minute today. He was out at practice, and he got his cast off today,
good,
so
good.
He's in a boot, which really now they can start not doing running type stuff, but just rehabbing, massaging, doing some range of motion type stuff that'll, sort of keep the atrophy down, and those kind of injuries are the most difficult things. So we're very encouraged. Everybody thinks he's doing really, really well, and he's had a great attitude about it, and he's going to work hard, and he told me that he wants to try to come back and play, but we're certainly not going to let that happen until, he's fully 100% healthy.
In case the kick is short or off the mark, he could run it back. The snap, the spot, the kick on the way. 8 of 8 in field goals, 37 of 37 in extra points. As we welcome you back to the Nick Saban Show, Eli Gold, Coach Nick Saban. Our special media guest is Ivan Maisel of ESPN.com. Our show being brought to you in part by Alpha Insurance. For auto, home, and life insurance, call Alpha. Ivan, jump right in again with the coach if you'd like.
Can I say something
Certainly.
Before Ivan
Certainly.
comes up? Since you were Will Reichert, you know, I got to tell you, last year after the Auburn game, I called Coach Stallings to see how he was doing. And he said, if I was you, I'd go recruit the best kicker in the country. And I said, well, we got the best kicker in the country here, but he just hurt.
Yeah.
Anyway.
The kid is good, man. He is something
Yeah,
special.
He's good.
He really is. Ivan, go ahead.
Nick, I'm curious, without fans in the stands, without a lot of fans in the stands, what do you hear on the sideline now, and how has that affected the way you coach? Can you talk to your kids more easily? Can you hear the coaches on the other sideline? How has that changed?
You know, really, in our stadium, because the spirit has been really pretty good, the noise level's not the same, but it's actually no different from our perspective, my perspective, in terms of how we communicate with the players. You know, there are times when it gets so loud that you couldn't hear and you had to, you know, so, but we've had great enthusiasm. I really appreciate what the fans have done. I think our players are still excited about playing. There's a great atmosphere in the stadium, even now, so we appreciate that. It's too bad that it is what it is, but, you know, we got to deal with what's in front of us, you know, at this time, and we all do. And how we manage that and how we handle that, I think, determines a lot how we can come out at the end. So it hadn't really changed much. The sidelines hadn't really changed much. We don't really change how we do cadence. We still do noise on Thursday for practice. I mean, you know, for when we have a home game, we do it for the offense to deal with the noise. I mean, when we have an away game, we do it for the offense. When we have a home game, we do it for the defense. And you would be surprised how much disruption that creates in practice, you know, when the players can't communicate verbally, which is what you're always trying to get them to do, but it's so much easier to do when there's no noise. So instead of giving a hand signal, they just say box, you know, or cloud or whatever the deal is. But then when you put the noise on and they can't do it and they have to do it, you know, like, you know, hand signals.
Sure.
But you'd be amazed how much disruption it causes. So if you don't do it in practice and you get in a game, really, really hard. Yeah. You know, there's things that people like no huddle, like the mental errors for the corner and the safety away from our bench when a team's going no huddle and fast, because everybody has to know the signal. There's no communication. They're going so fast on offense. We'll see it again when we play Arkansas. It's the same Baylor-type offense that Mississippi, Ole Miss, you know, runs. Those guys are furthest away from the bench, so they have a hard time seeing the signal. So if it doesn't get relayed and cosigned, the ball's getting snapped, and they don't even know what's been signaled yet. But it's so much easier for the guys that are lined up to our bench.
Sure.
Because the coach is right there. So a lot of issues with no huddle and fastball now. A lot of issues.
It's time for our final word tonight, presented each week by Mercedes-Benz. Mercedes-Benz, the best or nothing.
Yeah, well, I really think for our team, and I guess the fans can always be supportive of our team, the most important thing is that we kind of get our DNA back. I mean, the identity of how we compete and how we play. And, you know, that's really simple. You know, you try to play one play at a time. So what's next? Play the next play. Focus on what's in front of you. Don't look at the scoreboard. It's outcome oriented. It changes. All right, so you just got to keep playing to where, you know, you're trying to compete until you can wear out the other guy, and that's when you actually win, regardless of what's on the scoreboard, and that's usually the best way to win. I thought in the Mississippi State game, you know, things got difficult in the game, and some of our players got a little bit frustrated, all right, because they lost that mindset. All right, they thought the game wasn't going to be that difficult. All right, when it was difficult, they got frustrated. When they got frustrated, they didn't play as well and they didn't perform. All right, so we really want to reestablish that, sort of Mamba-type attitude that Kobe Bryant always talks about in terms of how you want to dominate the competition and don't look at the scoreboard, and you got to expect things to be difficult. And this will be a difficult game. Kentucky's a physical, tough, old-fashioned type team. All right, and those kind of teams, don't ever make it easy. All right, so it's going to be tough. That's what we need to expect. I think our fans being supportive of the players is always helpful, in that regard. So we're certainly looking forward to playing, and we're certainly looking forward to playing at home. It's been a long time, and I'm anxious to see how our players respond.
Exactly. Coach, as always, thanks for your time, and I know you want to join me in thanking Ivan Maisel for joining us here tonight.
Yeah, I certainly do. Ivan's someone that I've had a lot of professional respect for a long time, and he's always been really fair to me, and he was good to me before I was anybody, so I always appreciate those kind of guys, too.
There you go. Ivan, thanks for your time, and always great to have an Alabama guy on the show with us.
Thanks. I really enjoyed it. Good to see y'all.
Thanks,
Good
Ivan.
to see you.